we must never stop learning, no matter where we find ourselves, no matter what situations we find ourselves in. Learning is the heartbeat to an exciting life that's full of opportunity and happiness in education and in work.
Richard, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be with you.
It's been great to listen to you. It's been great to listen to someone like you who is an inspirational person who is changing the world.
Oh, stop it. You're going to make I'm going to make me get a big head.
I have to tell you. But here comes my first question. I don't know whether my Minister of Education is going to call you. I mean, UK has been very lucky, but I don't know whether it's going to be in Spain that way. But I know that our way of education is pretty traditional, and I think you know pretty much about it.
Yeah.
I don't know, what would be the first thing you would tell my minister to try to change something? I mean,
Well, I think the first thing is not necessarily to start playing with a new system or a new curriculum or a new test or a new assessment. One of the great concerns I have about education in countries like Spain and actually in countries like England is I think we've become so obsessed with trying to compete with other countries in the academic league tables that we've lost all sense of what our vision is. Now, you know, when you think about any organization, any company, any education system, if you don't have a vision, your system is really fragile because then you just keep chopping and changing and things become messy and confused. You know, so what I would be saying to your education minister is, what exactly is your vision for education? And to take that to the next level down, the question I'd ask would be, what do you want your children to look like as human beings when they leave education? And if we can start to unpick the human qualities that Spain needs for its young people to have, then you can start to build an education system. The problem at the moment is all of these new initiatives are built on quicksand. There's no strong foundation because we don't have a clear vision. So that's what I'd be wanting to work on with your Minister for Education first. Yeah,
I was going to ask you exactly that, because I wanted to know whether someone thinks what is the objective of education. Is it to create professionals for the future? Is it to create happy people? Is it what is the objective of education?
Well, for me, you know, I think we have a moral imperative. I think there's a moral imperative at the heart of education. And that moral imperative is to prepare our children for the challenges of their future, for their future. Now, in order to do that, I think we have a core responsibility. And the core responsibility of education is to develop in each young person a sense of their own personal aspiration and their own personal value. Now, what I mean by that, the difference for me between a dream and an aspiration is dreams are often fantasy. They're not something that you can see come true in reality. But an aspiration, you move from having a dream into having an aspiration where you can see tangible routes towards that goal, right? So suddenly you're building the rungs on a ladder, which allows a young person to see how they can reach that aspiration. And at the same time, we need to make sure that when a young person develops a sense of who they are, what makes them unique, what their skills and their interests are, we can help them understand their place in the world. Because one of the problems, I think, with education at the moment is too many of our young people leave education not understanding what their own personal value is in the world. So for me, we need to work hard on developing a sense of aspiration and a sense of value. And if we can do those two things, we can start to create a vision and a purpose for education that will fulfill our moral obligation, our moral imperative, which is to prepare our children for the challenges of their future.
Yeah, one of the things that reminds me what you are telling and what you are talking about is about vocation. I remember that when I was at school, I had, colleagues that already when they were 13 years old knew what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
They wanted to be doctors, they wanted to be teachers. I never felt that vocation, and I think the majority of my generation didn't have a clear vocation. And that's probably one of the secrets of being happy afterwards with what you are doing. How can we, help them find the vocation, help them
Well, I think there are a number of things. The first thing to say, by the way, is despite leaving education without that sense of aspiration, and maybe that's wrong, maybe we put too much pressure on children too young to know what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. You have gone on to be successful, and my guess is that you've gone on to have a whole diverse range of experiences and careers which have led you to the place you're in now as a hugely successful human being. So one of the things maybe is we need to stop believing that all of our children need to have a clear idea of what they're going to do with the rest of their lives when they're 17 or 18 years old. And actually what we need to do is develop in our children a set of skills and behaviors which allow them to have the confidence to believe. And as we look at the changing world that our children will be inheriting from us, a world that is impossible to predict, what we need is to allow our children to feel safe, secure and confident that their world may take them in different places, but they have the skills and the behaviors and the confidence to do that. The truth is, the age where you and I were children, where we were taught there would be one path and you follow that one path, and if you do, you'll be happy and successful, doesn't exist anymore. So we need to develop a different mindset in our children. And that might be to feel comfortable that they don't have one aspiration, but they have a series of things in their life that they might want to do. And also they're comfortable in realizing that even in their 20s, 30s and 40s, they have the opportunity to change that direction.
One of the things you talk about is creativity, and talking now about companies, talking about organizations, it's funny to see how many people in your company tell you, oh no, I'm not creative at all.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't have any creativity. How can we lose, as adults, something that we all have?
It's very interesting, the perception that creativity somehow is like fairy dust. That some people are sprinkled with the magic of the creative gene and other people don't have it, which isn't true. Because one of the things that my friend and mentor, Sir Ken Robinson, argues very strongly is that creativity is part of the makeup of a human being. We all possess the ability to be creative. To put it another way, for me, creativity and learning are almost the same thing, right? So when we're born, we are all born creative because we all have the ability to find things of interest, to question things, to experiment and play with things, and through that process, discover new things about ourselves and new ideas and theories. So that is creativity. So we're all born creative. The interesting thing is the perception that some people have that they're not creative. Maybe some of those people think creativity is purely for the arts, that if you can't paint or you can't draw or you can't act or you can't sing or dance, that you're not creative, which of course is ridiculous, because creativity is that ability to find something of interest, to be curious and confident enough to play with it and to find a new pathway as a result of that process. So we're all creative. So what I would say in response to that particular problem is to get people to relax and realize almost every day, whether they like it or not, because they're constantly learning and questioning and challenging, they're being creative. It's just some people make a big show about being creative and other people go through that process quietly and sensibly. But as long as you remain curious, as long as you question and challenge, as long as you keep asking yourself about your own life and where it could be and the things that interest you around you, you're being creative.
Okay. There is something that I always tell my team, my colleagues, and everyone that wants to listen, that we have the responsibility, we have the duty almost to believe and to act as if we could change the world.
Yeah.
And when you tell adults something like that, when you tell someone in a company, they look at you like, well, yeah, come on, we cannot do that. What would happen if you tell that to kids in a school? What would be the reaction? Because my sense is that we lose also that ability or that capacity of thinking that you're more able of doing big things than you ever thought.
Absolutely right. You know, and one of the things I often say to educators is the best models of education occur with the youngest children. Because not only the jump between childhood and adulthood, but if you look at the process through education, so if you're in an environment with young children, 3, 4, 5 years of age, they believe anything's possible. You know, they can create a doctor's surgery out of a few bricks. They can pretend to be astronauts with a bit of cardboard. And they believe in those things. And they believe they can do anything and they can reach the moon and play with the stars, right? But then you talk to 10 and 11-year-olds and they're already becoming cynical. They already believe that the world is controlled by other people, that they can't fulfill their ambitions because somebody has already taught them that this is what you'll do, this is how you do it, I'll tell you what to do, I'll tell you how to do it, and I'll tell you if you're right or wrong. So what happens is the transference of control. As young children, we believe we have control over our environment. But as we get older, what we're taught is that other people have control over our environment. So that by the time we become adults working and functioning in companies, we simply don't trust anymore that we have any control to do things that we want to do in a way that we want to do it, because now we've been taught to believe so well that somebody else will tell us how, somebody else will tell us what. You know, how many times, for example, do you find yourself in a meeting with your team and you say, come on, who's got an idea? And all that really happens is people try to guess what you want them to say rather than being free and confident enough to say what they truly believe. And we have to find a way to help our colleagues in our businesses and companies remember what it feels like to be a 5-year-old and to have the confidence and freedom to say what they believe and not to fear that if they say the wrong thing, somehow it's bad.
Absolutely. If you were working in a company, in my organization, what would be the first thing you would take from education to a company's culture, way of working? What skills and capabilities we need to take from that age into the companies to make a change?
I think the most important thing for me is to create a culture of action research where everyone in the organization feels that if they have an idea, they have the ability to try out that idea, to challenge themselves, to play with it, to bring other people into their idea, to see where they can take it. And then to be prepared to share that idea and what happened as a result of that idea. You know, I don't think there's enough honesty. I don't think there's enough time just to talk to one another, to just over a cup of coffee, you know, play, be daft, talk about things in a different kind of way. So I think that idea to be able to play with ideas and to collaborate in a soft way and not always with a fixed outcome in mind, it would be the first thing I'd want to do, to create that culture of play and action research.
What about passion? I hear you talk about passion, and I think it's such an important thing in the companies.
I think what's really important with that is to remember that while some people in a company may contain passion, often the founders or the leaders or the managers in a company, you can't assume that everybody comes into the organization with that same level of passion. Passion comes when you feel that something is really important to you, when you have control over something, where you can make a difference. And I think the danger particularly in large organizations, is the further down the hierarchical chain you are, the less you feel you have control, the less you feel you have a real influence, that you can make a real difference. So if we're going to develop that sense of passion in everybody, then what we need to do is make sure that everybody, no matter what layer they're at within the organization, feels their opinion is important, that their ideas are valued, and that they have the power to change the company too. And if people feel that they have a level of control, they're far more likely to be passionate about the company they're working in.
We were talking before about Eduard Punset.
Yeah.
You know him very well.
Great hero.
And when we worked together, we talked a lot about emotions, about managing emotions, and how we as parents can help kids to manage emotions. How do you do that? I mean,
well, I think the really important thing to help young people understand is the power of the moment. You know, how many of us look back on our childhood with huge affection and think about incredible days and often simple experiences that we had as children, but at the time we didn't stop to appreciate them. You know, it's only later in life you start to appreciate the simple things that we had as children. And I think sometimes some parents, because they care, are always talking to their children about what are you going to do next and what's the next stage, and study for this and do that, and when you're older and you should be doing this and you should be working towards that. And as parents, sometimes we need to stop that, take a breath, and just celebrate with our children today and the simple things, you know, a walk through the park, a look at the blue sky, a listening to the birds, a paddling in the ocean. And we need to spend more time with our children celebrating the moments that are now, rather than constantly telling our children that to keep looking to the future for what might happen when they're older and when they're grown up. We need to spend more time with our children celebrating the moment. You know, I now have 2 teenage children, and my daughter's just left home to go to university. And my wife and I often talk about our regret, you know, because that time goes so fast. And she's grown up now and she's left home. And if I had one wish as a parent, it would be that I spent more time with my daughter celebrating the moment and not so much time helping her think about the future.
Yeah, one of the exercises I always do with the 3 little kids I have is every night I ask them, what are 3 good things that happened to you today?
Fantastic.
And they get used to think about small things that made them happy that day, which is pretty useful. There is a thesis from Sonia Lyubomirsky from the California University, and she says that our happiness depends 50% on our genes, our genetics, 10% of our surroundings, our circumstances, and then 40% from our attitude, how we face things, how we face what happens to us. I mean, you see kids, you see very small people that have been in the world for not that long. Do you think it's that, I mean, genetics is so strong, or do you think it's...
I think context is strong. I think the environment in which you're raised makes the biggest difference. You know, I look back on my childhood, and it was a complex childhood. You know, my parents divorced when I was very young, in an age where divorce wasn't as common as it is now. There was quite a lot of animosity between my parents, so I lived in quite a difficult environment. But at the same time, I was surrounded by a mother who always helped me see the good things in my life, by grandparents and family that would help me see, you know, the potential and the possibility. We didn't have a lot of money. We often struggled for money, but my mother encouraged us to enjoy the simple things in life. So for me, environment is very important. You know, I consider myself to be a very positive person now. And right the way through my childhood, I remember my childhood being happy and constructive. And I remember, I think, not deliberately, but subconsciously, my mother helped me learn to always see that there are plus sides to everything. And I worry sometimes that some of our children grow up in environments where the family and people around them always talk about the negatives, how tough life is, how bad life is, how awful our life is, how much better it would be if we had this, or if we had money, or if we had a bigger home, or if we could go on a better holiday, or we had a faster car. And so for me, I think the most important thing about how we grow to view the world and grow to feel around that sense of happiness is the context we're given as children. So for me, I'm not an expert, so I don't know the percentages, but I think the most important thing of all is how we develop the environment in which our children grow up. And doesn't matter how complex and tough your circumstances, if you're taught always to see the opportunity rather than the negative, then you tend to grow up to be a much more happy and contented human being.
I have to ask you this. Are you sure in Casino Royale it was not Daniel Craig? It was
Stop
someone
it,
called
honestly.
Sebastian.
Daniel Craig is fatter than
No,
me,
you're
he's
kidding
very
me.
ugly,
I mean,
it's all
that
makeup,
was really
it's
sad.
all make-believe, really. It's not Daniel Craig, you need to know this. He's nothing. When he comes out the ocean in his trunks, that's not Daniel Craig.
Oh.
That was
very
me, actually,
sad.
but
That
with
was
his
very
face. No, I'm joking.
That was very sad. One last question. Richard, what is happiness for you? I want to know.
Boy, that's a big question.
I know.
isn't it?
That's why it's the last one.
What is happiness for me? Happiness is a sense that as a human being, I'm living a life that I enjoy with people I love, and that I'm making a difference to other people's lives in a way that I hope helps them to feel good about their existence too. I remember when my grandfather died, and we went to his funeral, and I was very upset because I lived with my grandparents for a while when I was a child, so I was very close to my grandfather. And I remember standing by the side of his grave, and a friend of his, quite an old guy, came up to me and put his arm around my shoulder, and he looked into the grave with me and he said, your grandfather had more integrity than any human being I'd ever met. And in that moment, and I was only a teenager, right? And I remember thinking to me, how sometimes you have moments in your life that you just know are important? At that moment in my life, I thought, if somebody could say that about me when I've died, then I will have lived a fulfilling and positive life, and I'd be happy. So for me, it's about being as good a person as you can be, enjoying the life you have with the people you love, and hopefully making a difference to the people around you. And always where you can, feeling that you have a responsibility to make the world better, not just for yourself, but for the people you come into contact with.
Well, I have to tell you, I really think you make a difference. If that helps, I really think so.
That's very important. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much.
Oh, my
Richard.
pleasure.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you.